All right, this saga began. I met my wife in Indiana in 1966, and in 1967, following the conclusion of my junior year in college, we decided to get married. And the impetus for that was, well, we thought we loved one another, was a primary consideration, but the other was that we were very sure that I was going to Vietnam because if you were healthy, pretty certainly you were going to go to Vietnam. The standard in those days was the oldest man available in your draft board. And in 1968, after I graduated, we knew we no longer had deferments, and I wasn't married with either one or two children, depending upon what applied at that time. So at that point, I knew in my immediate future I was going to go to Vietnam. And I'm sure that that had a lot to do with why we married early as opposed to waiting till I got home, because there was the great concern I wasn't coming home. So we did that, and I went to law school knowing I was going to get drafted because the GI Bill of Rights indicated that if I left in good standing when I returned from military, provided I did so within, I think, 6 months, they had to take me back. My considerations were that I didn't think I was qualified to get into KU, at least after I got back. I knew I could get in beforehand because the classrooms were empty. Nobody was there. So I took my chances. So one of the things that I can tell you was universal, and at the time I was there, officially there were 535,000 troops. To a man, everybody had a calendar. And at the end of the day, you crossed off that day. Now I only have 364 days, and you did that every single day until you got to 99 days. You still crossed your days off, but now you were officially a two-digit midget. That sort of gave you some seniority for maybe somebody else would have to do a duty that you might not have to do because you're getting closer to rotating home. And then you got to the magical time of 10 days. When you got to 10 days, we had a code. It was called FIGMO. And I'm not going to say on the camera what that means, but old guys, it's an expletive, which means I got my orders, I'm going home.
Okay.
And at 10 days, you didn't do anything. You hung out in the bunker, you did safe things, you did not put yourself in harm's way intentionally. Because with 10 days, you didn't want to risk an injury, even a shaving cut. Because if you couldn't pass your physical when you came back in country, they'd keep you. So you had to leave in good health. So at 10 days, unofficially, you just were exempt from duty to make sure you didn't get hurt. When I first got in country, my area where I lived was very close to a motor pool, and they had a guard dog there named Bull, and Bull had just sired a litter. And my dog, her name was Queenie. I got her, I don't think she was more than 3 or 4 weeks old, and they were going to destroy her because she was the runt of the litter and she had no value for what they were using the dogs for. I really don't remember how I got my hands on her, but I did. And she became my constant companion for the entire year that I was on my tour. And I can honestly say I'm sure she saved my life because I had her on a leash with me at all times. And if I was sleepy or tired, that was my sentry to wake up. But I had Queenie with me for a year, and I wanted to bring her home. So I made all the arrangements to bring her back. And when I got to Cameron Bay, I was told that I wasn't going to be able to bring her back. I was told that I could ship her. She'd be in quarantine in Seattle for a month. But they told me that they weren't letting war dogs out of the country. Number one, they were way too big, and they all kind of died early. And it would be unfair to her to bring her from one environment to the one I was bringing. So I happened to be serving with a gentleman, I still remember his name, a major in the JAG, Tony Bonfanti. And he asked me if I would give him Queenie, and he would take care of her and try to pass her off when his tour was over. and I lost track. Nobody ever kept in contact because that was the deal. We didn't keep in contact. When we went home, and you sort of never looked back. So I'm sure Queenie lived as long a life as she could have, but that was my girl for a year, and she got to be 110 pounds. She was a big girl.
What kind of?
I have to say that returning back to the world, as we called it, from the land of Jolly Green, was very dismaying. Obviously, I was delighted to be home and in one piece, and I was eager to put my life together, but this country was not in much of a mood to help us put our lives back together. When I got back, I could not get a job until a friend of mine, his dad, intervened because my friend was a veteran also. But when I was on my own, just basically knocking door to door, two things worked against me. Number one, eventually I was going back to law school, but primarily I just got back from Vietnam. And they didn't distinguish between the message and the messenger. They didn't trust us. They weren't sure whether we were going to explode and kill them or use drugs. It was not very pleasant. And I finally made it through, and 6 months later when I went back to law school, the campus was no less hospitable. The students up there were organized in demonstration on a daily basis. I had to walk past the student union every day to get to old Green Hall, the one where Jimmy Green still resides outside the law school. And I would have to go by 30 or 40 or 50 demonstrators every day, handing out publications and sticking flyers in your face, and they couldn't not know. My hair was long because I didn't get my hair cut very often. I'm wearing a field jacket, which was directly from my military service, and yet here's these kids who don't know anything about what's going on except how they're being directed by the press, or I don't know what all the agendas were. We were treated horribly. At the incoming military bases, frequently they had demonstrations and they'd carry signs, baby killers, pigs. It was not very much fun coming home. In fact, once we grew our hair out and started dressing normally, we didn't really discuss that we'd been to Vietnam. It kind of marked you as being looked down at. I mean, there was no thank you for your service. That's a modern thing. You just stopped telling people that you were in service. And going back to law school was very different. Law school was a job. It wasn't the same feeling I had when I was in school before that. And I have talked to other veterans about it too, just to see if they felt the same way. I really felt very alone, very apart. I wasn't like the people around me. And I don't know whether that was because I was filtering out my experiences and trying to, get through being a law student again. I'm not sure I understand the total dynamic. I just know that I felt really alone. And recently I've talked to other veterans, and they confirmed to me we were different. I mean, it's just that simple. We were different. And it showed. So